Welcome to Couples Therapy in 7 Words. I am your co-host, Judy Alexander, and I'm here with my husband, Dr. Bruce Chalmer.
Hello, Judy. Hello, viewers and listeners. We have an interview today. We just finished it. It was yet another delightful interview. We have a lot of delightful interviews.
We do. We're very lucky.
With a really interesting person. And Judy, why don't you give folks the title of the episode?
Okay, today's episode is The Caregiver Path, an interview with Daniella Marchick.
And Daniella, as you will see, she specializes in both, she does counseling and also consultation, all about the issue of being a caregiver for, typically for adults. That's what she's talking about. It's often older adults, often folks with dementia or possibly with some sort of disease.
Right.
And she's got lots of good stuff to share, and we thoroughly enjoyed the interview, and I hope you will too. So you'll get to that in just a moment. Before we do that, let's put in a plug for this podcast that you are now watching, listening, however you happen to be consuming us.
That's right.
And you can get access to all of our episodes at our website, which is
ctn7.com.
It's the number 7 in there for those of you who are just listening to us. ctn7.com, couples therapy in 7 words, ctn7.com. And when you go there, you can not only have access to all of our episodes, but you can check out our merch. We have these lovely CTN7 or Couples Therapy in 7 Words mugs in the 15 and 11 ounce sizes, suitable for whatever your favorite beverage is. And on one side it has our beautiful logo, and the other side it has our inspiring message. And you just need to have this for your favorite beverages. So go to our website.
And it also has t-shirts.
Also t-shirts as well.
And also the book. The book is available.
The book is available through that. It's also
the book.
Yes. It's available anywhere books are sold,
Right.
and it is called
Reigniting the Spark, Why Stable Relationships Lose Intimacy and How to Get It Back.
And I'm holding in my hand the paperback version. You can also get it for Kindle on the Amazon site, and what is proving to be, I think, one of the more, if not the most popular the format is the audiobook, which you can get from the Amazon site. And I did the narration myself. And that is,
who wouldn't love to listen to those dulcet tones?
The dulcet tones.
Of Bruce Chalmer.
Yes, and you know, the person who's doing the narration actually really believes in what's in the book.
That's right.
Because I did it, so there you go. So please check us out. And while you're at it, if you would interact with social media posts and do things like subscribe to the podcast. Also, when you've read the book, review the book. Give us a 5-star rating, of course. We would love that also for the podcast.
Follow us, share us.
That's how people find us these days. So without further ado, we will turn to our interview with Daniella Marchick, and we will see you on the other side. Enjoy.
Our guest today is Daniella Marchick. Daniella was born and raised in the San Francisco Bay Area, 10 minutes away from her grandparents, and her deep care of elders started at a very young age. She earned her BA in psychology and business from the University of Oregon. After a career in fundraising, Daniella worked as an activities associate at a local nursing home, which confirmed her passion in working with the older adult community. Her grandmother's diagnosis of Alzheimer's deepened her personal relationship to caregiving, which has continued for the past 15 years. Daniella earned her MS in counseling education and a certificate in gerontology from the Portland State University. As a licensed therapist and consultant, Daniella provides counseling for caregivers and elders and works with a variety of gerontology and mental health professionals. Daniella, welcome to Couples Therapy in 7 Words.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here with you both.
Well, it's great to have you. So we're wondering, just for starters, how did you get interested in working with caregivers? What was your path?
Yeah, thank you for that question. It is an important line of work. Our caregivers are the invisible web that keeps our society together, as many individuals with disabilities or aging really need the support and These people do it tirelessly day in and day out, mostly out of love, some out of guilt, some out of dedication. And that number is only growing, as we all may have been familiar with. And if for those of you who have not, but the term silver tsunami is out there. And that
I'm part of it.
yes, absolutely.
We're both boomers. I'm the old guy, but we're both boomers.
Right. So it's happening. Surely the tsunami of elders is coming. And so being someone who is attuned to that, really wanted to make sure that there is emotional support out there for our caregivers. I recall one time when I was working at the assisted living, I was working with the day program with individuals with dementia. And I had a client come in and she was really upset. She said, my daughter's really mad at me. I don't know why. And so her and I stepped aside. We did some coping mechanisms. We did some deep breathing, and I gave her a little space. And often we could, with individuals like that, we could calm them down and bring them back towards activities and distract them. But she kept returning to it all day. And it was a moment that became clear to me that she didn't remember why her daughter was mad at her. She just remembered the act that her daughter had raised her voice at her. And so there was a real reality for me of these lovely caregivers who are really trying their hardest in an extremely emotionally challenging situation, need their own emotional support, their own space, so that they can show up as calm and kind and compassionate as they can, as they continue this marathon that is caregiving. And for a lot of people, they don't even get breaks. And so that moment became clear to me. I've always been a therapist in some way or another. And so I decided to put those two together, and I returned to graduate school in that purpose. Yeah.
And do you work with couples at all, navigating, the crazy vicissitudes of having to deal with an elderly parent that needs care, that might either be living with them and creating friction within the household, or
absolutely
just how that affects relationships? Could you talk about that a little bit?
Happily. Yeah. Thank you for inviting that in, Judy. Caregiving impacts every person's relationship, whether that's a relationship with their siblings, with their parents, with their spouses, with themselves included. I have worked with couples in different variety of ways, and for one, I often see, it's so beautiful, I often see one person of a couple reach out to me so that their partner can get support. For example, my wife is caregiving for her mom, and I really would like her to find a professional therapist who knows what that means and can really help guide her with this difficult experience. For example, I also have had one of the couple reach out to me and say, my partner just got a big diagnosis. Can you work with him towards acceptance, towards understanding of really what this means for him, for us? I have worked with couples together as two people when receiving a big diagnosis, such as a dementia or a cancer, and to really navigate, what does that mean for us as individuals? What can I commit to as a care partner? What are our expectations of each other? A really big conversation about bringing in help and how to communicate with their loved ones and their communities. And then we may talk about this again later, but it also really impacts the couple's dynamic of what are the expectations on communication between each other, how it impacts their ability to be in a sexual relationship with each other. And
yeah, I hear lots of variations on those themes. When I don't know if, I guess you've seen some of our things. I'm the therapist of the two. Judy's an educator, and but I see a lot of couples, and of course I see that variation a lot. I've seen folks where the person, like an elderly parent typically, is living
Yep.
with them, and how that's causing friction. And
Yes.
I've seen ones where they're not living with them, but still it's consuming so much of the energy of one of the one of the two of the couple, that it ends up causing difficulties between the two. So I've seen
Absolutely.
a lot of those variations.
Yeah, yeah. And it's not an easy choice. There's not a clear answer. You know, if there was a
Mhm.
formula or an answer, we would go for it. But to choose between one's mom, partner, and one's romantic spouse, like that is not a choice that one would want to make. And the needs rapidly change. And so
Mhm.
you come to an idea and some agreements, and then all of a sudden that doesn't work any longer.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah. It's a lot of communication, and it's hard to find time for that communication. And for many caregivers, 61% of caregivers are working at the same time as
Mm.
they are caregiving. And a lot of them are spending, I don't have the statistic in front of me, but a lot of people spend about an average of 13 full days a month working on caregiving tasks.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's got to take its toll mentally and
Absolutely.
physically and emotionally on
Yeah,
everybody.
on everyone. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
what's your role in that? Like,
Yeah, thank you. Well, I'm wanting to talk to more professionals around the idea that everyone is working with a caregiver and they may or may not know it,
Yeah.
because a lot of
Yeah.
people may show up into the education space, the therapy space, the doctor's office for a different concern, but 1 in 6 adults in the United States are actively caring for someone 50 or older. So that is a huge percentage of people. So
yeah.
one of the hats that I wear is to do some training for fellow coaches, therapists, educators about the caregiving path. We've actually created a developmental model about the typical journey that a caregiver goes through.
Yeah,
And
I noted that in your materials, on your, we saw that on your profile. Could you
yeah.
tell us about that? How did you come up with that developmental stage model, and tell us about what it's about?
Yeah, well, a colleague of mine, Erin, and I have been working on this for a while now, and we both come from it from different paths. You've heard my path, and she was a professional caregiver before she went to grad school to then become a therapist working with fellow caregivers as well. And so she's brought the professional caregiving lens, and I have brought the working within a facility and also working with caregivers lens. And what we see is that whether it's a spouse or an adult child, usually are the two main people who are caring for a loved one, they just slowly are doing more things for their loved one, whether that is cleaning out the refrigerator more often because mom's not remembering to take out the moldy things, or lifting and moving heavy things and being more of the contact person within the community. So there's these tasks that you slowly take on as someone who loves someone who may be going through this need of having a caregiver. And we call that the pre-phase, and then all of a sudden a turning point happens. So a fall might happen, I went in with a stomach ache and then I learned actually it's cancer. A turning point happens in which it becomes really clear that you are a caregiver. And at that point, there's a lot to wrestle with. It's a huge learning curve. What does that mean for me in terms of, do I need to bring my loved one to move in with me, or do we a lot, right? Do we need to move them into an assisted living type facility, or do we need to hire help? We need to work with siblings. A lot of sort of the quick task of trying to understand, what does this mean? What does this diagnosis mean? And then that's a big learning curve. And then you sort of live the role for a while. You've figured things out. mom or dad is placed somewhere that's safe for a little bit. We've learned maybe, for example, about dementia, so we have a little bit of an understanding of what to expect. And actually, as a therapist, I really work with a lot of individuals about really understanding what that is, because unfortunately with our medical system, our doctors only have 10, 15 minutes to discuss things, and that's difficult to really have an understanding. And we're often in shock when we're getting this information. And
Yes.
so, yeah, right, as you guys can imagine. And so I think there's a role for us support people out there, therapists included, to really help hold space for someone to understand what this said diagnosis means. And I believe if we get our fellow professionals prepared, we can help these caregivers think about what's the next step. So instead of acting out of shock and out of need, we have a little bit of a game plan, one step ahead of what's happening. So I really believe that empowering us professionals a bit more about the caregiver journey is really going to be helpful.
Yeah. It's interesting. I was thinking as you were describing that, of course, we've each lost, I mean, the age we are, it's not surprising we've lost our parents, although your mom not that long ago, it was just a couple of years ago.
And we've each, dealt with issues of dementia and having to assume roles that, like you're talking about now, maybe not to the full extent.
But it was interesting that thought, sort of the developmental phase aspect that, I remembered that sense of, oh, gee, my father was starting that. I even said at our wedding, which was like 18 years ago, and my father was then in his 80s. And I remember saying to Judy, yeah, that wasn't quite my father anymore, even though he wasn't showing any obvious signs of dementia. And it took a long time. He developed it, but, he saw the early signs with each of our various parents. And I'm thinking of someone actually I work with in the office whose wife was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. He saw the signs beforehand, and then they finally got a diagnosis, and then that set in motion a whole bunch of other things, including a great deal of anxiety, not surprisingly. But that sense that you sort of see, something happens, like somebody falls or somebody has some kind of episode, and suddenly you're in a different situation. One of the things I see, I'm curious if you want to comment on this, Daniella.
Sure.
One of the things I've seen with folks is they're working with elderly parents who are still living on their own.
Yes.
And the situation I've seen many times where the folks who are talking to me, which tends to be their adult children, and they're saying, mom or dad, they're refusing to leave the house. I mean, they don't want to move, and yet it's getting more and more obvious that they really can't be living on their own. And yet they still have their marbles, which is good news, not bad news. They still have their marbles enough that legally they can still make their own decisions. It's just that the decision they're making isn't very sensible. And what it often boils down to is, well, you're just going to have to wait until some crisis.
Yes.
And I'm curious if you encountered that, and is there, what else should I offer people other than that observation?
Yeah. It's really tricky because we want to have our elder to have as much autonomy as they can while they can, because if they do get to live out a full progression of their life, often they will get to a point where that autonomy is not as available to them. And it makes sense as adult children being concerned about our parents who are living alone and recognizing where there might be some real vulnerabilities for the safety of someone we care about. And the answer is to have some real deep, honest conversations, right? Which is not always available in every relationship with a parent, because we all have our histories with these folks. But there's some really beautiful documents out there. One that I really love, it's called The 5 Wishes. And it's a document that is very similar to a living will, but it helps guide these conversations about finances, some of the big medical decisions that they would want. And it is an avenue into a conversation with a parent about one's concerns.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's the folks who I hear from who are able to have that kind of conversation, even though it's still difficult, they're the ones who are, for whom it's not, it doesn't seem like such a crisis. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, well, dad finally realized, okay, we're going to have some serious conversation. They have the conversation. That's great. The ones I often hear about are the ones where dad simply will not have the conversation.
Right.
And maybe they've had a, 60-year history of refusing to have that kind of conversation. And so it becomes kind of difficult in that case.
Absolutely. So then the work can be, well, what's your plan? You
Yeah.
can't plan with them, but we know that crisis is going to come. What are your boundaries?
Mhm.
What are you
And
willing
where
to
is
do?
that document available? You mentioned the 5 wishes. How is that available to people?
It's its own website called the fivewishes.org.
We will post that.
Yes, yeah, it's not mine. I love it, but it is not mine.
No, but it's good to learn about these things, especially talking about this topic. That would be very helpful to people.
Absolutely. And there's also a new document, relatively new document out there that hopefully will get some more traction. Is called the Dementia Living Will. Also not mine, belongs to a lawyer, but it is very similar to a living will, but through the lens of dementia.
Wow.
And it is another avenue of a conversation to start having with a loved one and for yourself. One of the suggestions I would say to you about working with someone on the couch who's like, I'm worried about my parents, it's like, it also brings up our own fears about what's going to happen to us.
Very
Yes,
much.
indeed. We know that one, of course. Just, and when I turned I'm 71 now. When I turned 70 last year, that it's not like it was a light switch, but the noticing little memory lapses and things like that, which I've had little memory lapses my whole life, but noticing that stuff, it kind of takes on deeper significance when you can't deny you're an old person anymore.
That's
like,
true.
I've been a card-carrying Medicare recipient now for 6 years, and by golly,
Mhm.
now I'm even in my 70s.
Mhm.
It really, and of course, lots of folks my age are thinking in those terms. So the idea of something that would say, okay, it could happen. Well, and maybe you could inform us on this. I don't know what the percentage is, but it's not small, of people who live long enough, they're bound to develop some kind of dementia. If
Right.
that's the interesting thing about medical science these days. We've cured a bunch of stuff that used to kill us young when we still had our marbles.
Absolutely.
And so
Right.
now we're living long enough that most of us, I don't know,
Right.
lots of people are going to lose their marbles. To
Yeah.
be able to plan for that sounds like a really good idea.
Currently, 26% of people who are 50 and older will have Alzheimer's or a dementia.
Interesting.
And that percentage increases, right? For the 70-year-olds, it's a smaller percent. The 80-year-olds, the 90-year-olds, the longer you live, the higher percentage of the chance that you will be connected to a dementia.
Yeah.
And then there's a whole other idea around it, is like, how does eating and our current stress level of society, will that also increase the amount of people with dementia in 20 years? There's a belief that sugar is a component to developing. Yeah.
Uh-oh.
So let's see, do I have
Yeah.
to give up Ben and Jerry's in order to not develop dementia? Have to weigh that one carefully.
That's a real quality of life.
Do I want to live?
Yeah, exactly. And that is something that I think is really important for us professionals when we're working with people, is to really address the idea of quality versus quantity of life.
Yeah.
Because our medical system is set to look for solutions.
Yes.
So they will want to encourage you to try these new things and solutions. And for many times that makes a lot of sense. But when we're towards our late 70s, early 80s, do these medical procedures outweigh the quality of life?
Well, and that's it. When they say, you're saying solutions, and that's a very narrow focus, solutions in terms of extending life, but not necessarily solutions in terms of improving quality of life.
Yes. Yeah. Right. Yeah. There's a beautiful writer out there named Stephen Jenkins, and one of his phrases is, are we prolonging life or postponing death?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Mhm.
So in thinking about that one person I was thinking about whose wife, had an Alzheimer's diagnosis, and this is going to segue into something that you mentioned in your materials.
Yeah.
One of the things he has found amazingly helpful has been a support group,
Yes.
because and it's interesting, it's very helpful, and then there's also the downside aspect as well. But I'm curious if you can comment on that, because I know you consider support groups. I think you offer them, do you not?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for mentioning that. And each person is different in what they need, of course. However, often people are caregiving in a silo, and maybe the rest of their community doesn't understand, like, no, I actually have to go and be home and be timely and go to these doctor's appointment, all this stuff, especially there's a lot of young caregivers as well who are taking, and their age group is not doing it. So you can be really misunderstood about the physical demands, the time demands, and the emotional demands that caregiving really, and the caregiver really entails. And so I believe in support groups in so many ways. So when you can find other people who are having that same experience, there's something that feels really belonging, where you don't have to explain it to someone. They just already understand it. And also a lot of good ideas get shared that way. It can be a little scary because you could sort of see the future in some
Yeah,
ways. So,
yeah. Yeah,
um,
it's that sort of hive mind aspect that
yes,
the person I've worked with has found so amazingly helpful, because
right,
there's just a lot of knowledge out there. And I think the group he was dealing with, it was online, but there was lots of folks in our local area, so
right.
that he could just be given information about local resources, and then just plain old ideas from other folks who are going through something similar. It's really helpful stuff.
Absolutely. But my concern, and the reason that I've started a support group, so I have started a program called Calm, Compassionate, Connected Caregivers, and it is really focused on the caregiver itself and their emotional needs. So I
Mm.
believe so deeply in these support groups that we just talked about, because that sharing of resources is invaluable. But yet it tends to be yet again focused on the care recipient. How do we find the solutions? How do we make sure it's about them? And so I'm really stepping into the idea of how can we keep it focused on the care partner, the caregiver, because it is such a opportunity of growth and knowledge about one's emotional reactions and their own ideas of how to age, um, that this program would invite people to really address their guilt and their joy and their fears and their sadness, and really focus on the emotional aspects of caregiving. And
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
and if we can really learn to be with those emotions, come up with a few coping skills, really validate that, my belief that it will allow that caregiver, that care partner, to stay calmer and connected to their own values, and be able to be in the marathon, be more present of what's happening, versus being overwhelmed by guilt and fear and
Mhm.
And angry,
sadness
because
and
I'm sure
Yeah.
there's
anger.
a lot of
Yes.
anger.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh yeah, resentment, right? And
Yeah.
also,
Yeah. How do you deal with um, siblings when overwhelmingly there's usually one that ends up doing the bulk of the work, and the other two are either absentee siblings or so minimally involved or can't be bothered or live out of state or whatever it is. They are just like a hands off, and then there's the one hands on. So how do you navigate
right.
the sibling thing?
Yeah. Oh, family dynamics, right? They've been impactful to us since we were a wee years old until the very end. I actually do some work consulting and work with with families. So I have a number of families on my caseload where we talk about divvying up roles, and also, as said, talking about what's coming up next and how to work together, and really taking some time to tell each other, what is my capacity? Not what I want my sibling to have and how they want them to show up, but what is it really for them? And how can we best use our strengths to, as best as we can, to work together in this huge endeavor process, and also to have a shared space to really be with the grief that is present. Like, regardless, we are all grieving a loved one.
Right.
No matter how complicated the relationship is, the grief can be complicated.
Yeah, and of course, and plenty of people have pointed this out, the thing about losing someone, I think especially with dementia, is that, if you're losing someone to cancer, the grief is about their dying. If you're losing someone to dementia, the grief is about you lose them years before you lose them.
Right.
And it's complicated because you don't, it's hard to know how to make sense of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That anticipatory grief that you're already going through the grieving process while this person is still alive.
Yeah. I mean, when they stop recognizing who you are, or speak. Yeah, I hear stories about this a lot. I remember some of that actually in my own family, where, one of my parents, I only had one episode of that, but it really has stuck with me, where my mother did not recognize me.
Yeah.
And that, you say, actually several times she'd recognize me. Once she was hostile. She'd never been hostile to me in her life, and she treated me like I was some sort of horrible person. It was really painful, that sort of thing. And yet there she was, still alive, and I still felt this sense of, love and obligation and whatever. But that's hard stuff to go through. I guess, I imagining getting siblings together to be able, and I was able to talk about that with my siblings. To be able to talk about that is, and facilitate that, has got to be very helpful to them.
Absolutely. Yeah. And one of the reasons why I really believe that all of us deserve a space with a therapist to process that, and why more therapists and coaches and healers need to be trained in this, so that they can say to these folks, it is not that this is no longer your loved one, this is the disease. And really being able to get that perspective. It's not an easy perspective to accept, but it is really important to remember that your mom is not who she has been. So we cannot. Yeah.
I'm remembering another thing I'll share too, because it's a joyous one. We were together in that one, where my mother was like long gone in terms of her mind. It just wasn't much there, but she could still speak. And she had no idea who we were, but she was very friendly, which she tended to be. That was her. She had no idea who we were, but we were sitting together, and I forgot what it was. Like, you asked her, did she know me and my brother's names, and she smiled and said, they're the waiters. We cracked up, and my mother cracked up, and we're all sitting there laughing, belly laughs, together. She thought it was hilarious. I don't know what thinking meant to her, but it was a lovely moment. I really cherish that. And you can have that too. There's something about, if you can find that sense of the sacred that is still there. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
She was still my mother in that moment, even though it wasn't obvious, but there was that person that I could know and love, because we were sharing joy together, even though it didn't make
Right.
It made no sense.
Made no sense.
But it was still something that we were able to laugh at. And then when she saw us laughing, she just cracked up. So
humor. You have to include humor in tragedy. Yeah. And also, there's something that's really connecting around, we all can laugh, we all can cry. These not basic, but these emotions, these basic human emotions, people still have access to, even when they're on the dementia spectrum. They may not have the reason why it's happening, but the ability to really have emotional experiences is available. And so if we can tap into that, instead of being about the content of what they're saying or what they remember, but really, really try to be on the emotional connecting level with them, that is the goal.
The other thing that occurs to me when you say that is, did you see the Tony Bennett thing with Lady Gaga.
Oh, so beautiful.
Oh,
Yes.
we were just
Yeah.
bawling watching it. But
Yeah.
the fact that he was with a fairly advanced dementia, that he could do those songs with, clearly the musical stuff. And I'm a musician, but we both do a lot of musical stuff.
Yeah.
And that's stored in so many places in the brain that the brain can have a whole lot of damage and still that's available. And the fact that that was available to him is just very moving.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Music is a really beautiful way to keep connected to yourself. And for example, one thing is that I had a client back when I was working at the adult day program, who, if I would sing The Sound of Music with her, she would stand up and walk faster. And then
Wow.
she would sing with me. And so music is stored in, as you said, in multiple places of the brain, and is a really connecting element for some people. But for some others with dementia, music can be really rattling because of how
Yeah.
it's transcribed in the mind.
Mhm.
So each person, their senses change a bit. So it's knowing your loved one and trying out to see which senses are still working, and
Yeah.
whether eating something like an orange can be a really pleasurable experience still. And
Mhm.
yeah. And to go back to your questions about working with families, is so not only is it on that level of really helping them devise a plan, but holding that emotional space. And that also includes, the romantic relationships in families. It changes. Being a caregiver can really change one's ability to be present within their own emotional relationship, as well as if it really is impactful for spouses who are caring for a loved one. And one term that I think is really beautiful is a widow in waiting. So
Wow.
for
Yeah.
Mhm.
Mm.
Yeah. And as you can imagine what that means. And I just feel like that's a term that we can start using more freely and understand what that means, and talks about that anticipatory grief a bit more.
Mhm.
And so ideally we catch these couples earlier in conversations and in these disease prognosis, and talk about, if I were to go down the dementia route, I would want you to be able to date again, potentially,
Mm.
even if
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm still alive. Like, if you find a partner, or I mean, every couple has its own dynamics and what's true to them, but the sooner we can have those conversations, the less of a guessing game it is at the end. And
Yeah. And that works the other way too, sometimes, where a person with dementia who's in a facility. Well, who was that? Sandra Day
Sandra Day
O'Connor's
O'Connor's husband.
her
Yeah,
husband.
yeah.
That's right. Yeah. Do you
Yep.
know that story?
I don't know this particular story, but
Yeah. Well,
I would look here.
she was a now
Supreme Court.
retired Supreme. I
Well,
guess
she's now
she died.
dead.
Yeah.
Yes.
She was a Supreme Court justice,
The
but her
first woman.
husband
Yeah.
developed dementia, and he fell in love with somebody else he was living with in the assisted care facility.
Right.
And she was happy for him.
she was fine.
Yeah. Because she was
Strong.
no longer part of that, his life and memory that they were married. So she was very happy that he found happiness.
Absolutely. It's a strong woman. She was in multiple ways, obviously.
Absolutely. Yes.
But yes, and
takes.
that's some of the work that you could do ahead of time, in couples therapies with couples, is what does that look like for you guys? What do you need to hear from each other earlier on in this relationship, so that when we are at this time that maybe one of you is a care partner and one's a care receiver, that there's a shared understanding.
Yeah.
And
Well,
same with siblings.
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
This might be a good time for us to get into our listener question.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
And this will bring up more discussions. So the listener question comes from Phyllis this week, and she writes, "Dear Bruce and Judy, my husband, let's call him Mark, and I have been together for over 30 years. We've had our ups and downs, but have mostly done okay. Our 3 kids are all out on their own. Mark works as a software engineer, and I have my own business working from home, selling crafts online. Our problem is Mark's mother, whom I'll call Alice. She moved in with us 5 years ago after her husband, Mark's stepdad, died. I was fine with it since she and I always got along well. And for the first couple of years, it was okay. Alice had some memory issues, but nothing too serious. But since she turned 80 about 3 years ago, her memory problems have become a lot more severe. She now needs someone with her all the time because she's wandered off and gotten lost. With Mark working outside the home, the burden falls on me to be Alice's full-time caregiver, while at the same time trying to keep my business going. Mark and I agree that we don't want to make his mom move into assisted living, which we don't think we can afford in any case. But Mark doesn't understand how stressful this situation is for me, and it's causing arguments. How can I make him see that I need help? I don't want this to threaten our marriage, but I don't know how long I can do this. What can I do?
Thank you. Yeah, I have a lot of compassion for her and Mark and Alice. Can you remind me the writer's name?
Phyllis.
Phyllis, yeah.
We change names, but just
Well,
we're calling her
I'm
Phyllis.
sure they do too.
They probably do too.
Yeah,
So who knows?
yeah.
Maybe it's somebody named Phyllis who changed her name and we changed it back.
So
I have
Phyllis
no idea.
and Mark are
Who
the couple.
knows?
Alice
Yeah.
is the mom.
Yeah.
Yes. And Alice might be changing names often too because she's living with a dementia.
That
So
too.
Exactly.
here we are with just titles and things. It's really common. First, I just want to address Phyllis and say that unfortunately, the burden still falls on the woman, regardless whether it's your parent or your spouse's parent. It's 65% of the woman is doing that. And I think that is probably really underreported. I am sorry that our culture is still set up that way. I hope that changes. And I believe that you know your husband best, Mark, in this case. Is he someone who likes data? Would it be helpful for you to write down what you do every day for a week and show it to him?
Software engineer, maybe he does.
Yes,
Yeah.
that would be helpful.
As an idea, right? So it is it is about knowing your partner and how they receive information. Is it important for you to take him out of the house and sit down and really share some deep emotions? Would that open him up a little bit, or would that freak him out? And mostly talking about what the expectations are. Is his expectation for you to be the full-time caregiver? And are you willing to do that? Or can you guys sit down and strategize around what is a different solution? The thing is really sad that a lot of times the care partners, caregivers, get their own health decreases because of the amount of work that they're doing caring for their loved one. 21% of people who are caregivers report that their own health has deteriorated. So telling him that, like, I don't want my health to deteriorate. Really, we don't want these diseases to take more than one family member down, because that's already hard enough. Unfortunately, with the dementias and their 24-hour cares, you often need to bring in help, regardless of whether that's going to live in assisted living or bringing in care providers. You can check with your local area on agencies to see what kind of resources are available for different socioeconomic levels. And within the resource, I would also say going to an Alzheimer's support group is yet another good avenue, but you're going to have to be really firm with your husband and make it really clear to him that this is no longer working. you can contact someone like me and have someone guide you through these conversations, someone who has that knowledge base of what the caregiving role is and what dementia looks like, so that sometimes in relationships, all of our relationships, I'd venture to say, you can say something to your partner and they don't listen to it, and it comes from professional and it's the exact same thing, and they listen to it. I'm guilty, my partner is guilty of it. That's just the truth. I believe. I don't know. Do you guys feel that?
Oh, good
Oh, you
heavens.
see that all the time.
I see it in the office. In fact, I have a kind of a standard little warning I give folks. It comes up not exactly in this context. I'll tell you where it comes up. I'm male, cisgendered heterosexual therapist, right? So and if I'm working with a couple where they are, cisgendered heterosexual couple, and the woman is talking about these things that the guy just won't hear, and so I'm not telling anybody what to do, of course, that's not my business, but I'm trying to help them hear each other. And lo and behold, the guy will hear it from me, even though he doesn't hear it from her. And his expectation then is, oh, she'll be glad. And I will often point out, yeah, perhaps. She also might be royally pissed off that she's been trying to tell you this for years. And then you come to some total stranger who happens to be a white guy and hear it from him, So there is that aspect, that
is the truth.
You kind of have to watch out for that.
Yes. And it happens, right. In most relationships. And so we can accept that as being true and try to get some help for you, Phyllis, in that way. That's my initial reaction. I hope that's some good ideas, and I've somehow really changing the dynamic so it's doesn't feel like a complaining, but it's I want to sit down and have a serious meeting about what's happening. And for us, trying to approach Mark as let's you and I figure out how to be a team and really loving your mother here, right? Yeah. And let's sit down and do that instead of us each playing our own roles and trying to just piecemeal it together in some way.
Yeah. And she didn't mention if he has siblings.
Right.
That would be, and there's sort of an implication there. She didn't mention them, an implication that they're not thinking of this. If there are siblings, they're not thinking of them much in the way of resource. Maybe they're not around, who knows? Or maybe he doesn't have any. She didn't say.
Right.
Yeah. So finding, for Phyllis to find someone like you, basically, to find someone who has some specific knowledge and training about this would be useful. And of course, that's part of what you're offering is not merely to folks like Phyllis, but you're offering things to folks like me, right? You're offering to other professionals some specific resources. And you mentioned you have a website. Why don't you tell us the website name? We can put that up as well.
Yeah, thank you. So the training that's for other helping professionals out there is called Professional Competency in Elder Caregiving. And we are running a 2-day live workshop in October. One is online and one is based in Portland, Oregon. And we really just need other helping professionals to be on our team, because the more we have of other people out there who understand the demands of caregiving and the resources that are out there, the better equipped and the way that we can really, I believe, honor our elders.
And what's the website that people should go to get information about that?
That is www.professional competency in elder caregiving.
Professional competency in elder caregiving.
Correct. .com. Thank you.
Professional. We'll post that. It'll be on the screen, folks, when you're seeing this.
Yes.
Put it up on the screen when I edit this. Yeah.
And do you also deal with people like Phyllis and Mark? Do you do individual counseling or couples counseling or family counseling?
I do, yes. So the other arm of of my practice, I support both, and that's the work that I have been doing for longer, is working with couples and families and individuals who are in the caregiving role. And you can find out more about that through my website, supportivecaregivers.com. And that on that website is where you learn about my group program, which is a 6-week group program that focuses on different emotions and really setting up the individual with a plan on how to take care of their own emotional health while they're in the role of caregiving, so that they can really be the type of caregiver that they want to be, which is acting out of love and trying to honor their loved one. And on that website also has my consulting services. So I am a consultant for people who are anywhere in the world who want to hire me to do a few sessions around setting up a plan, talking with their families. And then if you are located in the states of Florida or Oregon, I can be a therapist for you. So those they're separate technically. Yeah. But I've had many people come to me just to consult for 3 to 5 sessions and really help set them up moving forward.
Yeah, well, that's important. I think once people hear it, like you said, from an outside source, it gives them some direction, in some ways gives them permission.
Yes.
You know, especially if one is saying this all the time and the others aren't hearing, you know, kind of very, you know, it affirms what they've been saying all along. And it's nice for somebody else to hear it from a third party who's not emotionally involved.
Yes, exactly. And the truth is it's a really emotional reality to be caregiving, because
it's a highly emotional, this whole issue of, you know, dealing either with a parent or a spouse or, you know, God forbid, a child even. But it's so hard.
And so that's part of the work, is how can we remember that we're both in this difficult place? How can we become a team to work towards caring for our loved one instead of acting out of emotion? How can we be together in this emotion, be with it, and then make calm, rational, really difficult decisions? Some of the hardest in life, really, to make a decision about a loved one. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for doing this.
And thank you for your work. That's so important.
Thank you, Judy. I appreciate it. And Bruce, it was nice to meet you both. Thank you for the work that you guys are doing. And really, I really liked the tagline, "Be kind, don't panic, and have faith."
We have to show it now. We have to show our merch. You know.
Yeah, there it is.
It's on the cups. Yes.
Yeah. And I was just thinking about how much that is a great tagline for someone who's caregiving as well.
Yes, absolutely.
We can give out our mugs as
send them to our website, ctn7.com. That's actually, people will see that if they're watching this, they'll see that above heads as well.
Great.
Well, thank you so much. And
thank you for the opportunity. And I hope that your community reaches out as necessary and shares the information for those who may benefit from the work that I'm doing in the world.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you, Daniella.
Bye, you guys. Take care.
Well, I hope you found that interesting and helpful, because I know she was delightful to speak with, and I certainly learned a lot. And I will tell lots of friends of mine about this, because a lot of us are dealing with elderly parents these days.
Absolutely. And, you know,
and some people with spouses.
Yeah.
You know?
And it's interesting, the work she's offering for other professionals, I think, is also interesting to let folks, you know, we as professionals encounter this a lot, and it would be good for us to know more about this and be able to help folks, because it is indeed a very widespread.
You know,
there's
it
lots
would
of
be, because, you know, I'm thinking back to my own mother, and she was having issues, and she was seeing, you know, different doctors for different things, and I don't think any of them understood what she was going through. And
understood what her caregivers were going through.
Correct.
Also, which is that is a very common issue. I hear about that a lot.
So I think that's really important, that lots of caregivers need to have this type of training.
Yeah. So if you would like to be a guest on our podcast, you can get in touch with us, as indeed Daniella did, actually.
Yes, she did.
I think most of the folks we've been interviewing have been getting in touch with us. And you can do that by just dropping us a line. Tell folks how to write to us.
Right. You can write to us. You can write to Bruce at ctn7.com, or Judy in ctn7.com, or just go to our website, ctn7.com, and you'll see a tab there where you can write to us, where you can sign up to be a guest on the show. And you can also make recommendations for people that you think we might like to interview.
Indeed. And also, if you notice, as usual, we did a listener letter on the show today. And if you would like to submit one of those letters, something that you find you'd like to hear us talking about, or a particular issue, as we had today from Phyllis, please send that along to us. Also, same email address as bruce@ctn7.com or judy@ctn7.com. Mm-hmm. And let's put on another plug for the book.
That's right. That's Reigniting the Spark, Why Stable Relationships Lose Intimacy and How to Get It Back.
And that is available anywhere books are sold. And I've been saying, and I will continue to say, just to drum up all sorts of excitement, my next book is the first draft of it is done. It is now getting, folks are looking at it and giving me really helpful comments. And when that is available and published, we will let you know. Not going to be right away, but we'll let you know. And I'll even tell you the working title. Not promising it'll end up being that, although
That's
by
true.
golly, I really like this title. The working title is It's Not About Communication, Why Everything You Know About Couples Therapy is Wrong. So if that isn't intriguing, by golly, what is? And that's what folks have told me. It's intriguing. Some folks have told me it's a little bit much, but a little. I'll risk a little bit much.
Little bit much.
Little bit much.
That's okay.
Yes.
That's all right.
So I think we've said what we need to say
I
here.
think we have.
And so until next time,
Remember, be kind
don't panic.
and have faith.